Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's session on PCOS and the Caribbean woman. I am so happy to see you ladies out here this evening. We are streaming live on Facebook as well. So for those who are watching us live on Facebook, good evening and welcome. I hope that this evening's session is going to be very informative for you and that you walk away with a lot of information. If you have any questions or comments, you can place them in the chat, whether here on Zoom or on Facebook, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. So I'd like to introduce this evening's facilitator, presenter, Tessa Hampton, RD, who is a registered dietitian with a Bachelor's of Science honors degree in human nutrition and dietetics and a diploma in institutional and community nutrition and dietetics from the University of the West Indies. She is passionate about showing others how your local cultural foods can fit in a healthy diet whilst simultaneously improving existing medical conditions. In her private practice, she specializes in helping adults achieve weight management and control of conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, high cholesterol, hormonal imbalances, and polycystic ovarian syndrome. So we welcome Tessa, and I hand over the reins to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here, especially as we are within PCOS Awareness Month. So I'm going to share my screen and you all are going to let me know if you can see the image. Let me just make it big, right? So everybody's seeing?
Yes, please.
All right.
Yes.
So what we are talking about today is PCOS and the Caribbean woman. And why I chose this as the title was, well, you will see as we go through the presentation. Oftentimes, data is not skewed towards our region. It will more or less often reflect the Americas or even Europe for that matter. So we want to explore how do we understand the condition, how do we manage it, and how do we empower those who have it. And we're going to look at the unique challenges and management strategies that will be relevant for our region and Caribbean women in terms of our culture and our specific lifestyle. All right. So we are looking at the unique challenges faced by Caribbean women living with PCOS who need tailored support and education. And the theme for 2025 is the lifestyle. Hold on, I can't see it with the Zoom being so big. Let me just mute that. Right. So emphasizing the need for support. So we're looking at lifestyle management, closing gaps, elevating care to aim to highlight the importance of culturally relevant strategies in managing this condition. And basically empowering yourself means kind of helping yourself. I often find, at least in my practice, when women are first diagnosed with PCOS, they may reject the diagnosis. Of course, I don't diagnose them, their health practitioner does. Or they may feel like now they are lost for words. What do I do? This is the worst thing that can ever happen to me. Now, I'm not going to sit here as somebody with PCOS and tell you having this condition is a walk in the park. But if you understand how to deal with it, you can manage it adequately and have a great quality of life. And that's technically what the theme is all about. So, of course, you introduced me already, but just to let people know again, so I am a registered dietitian. I have been one for over 8 years now, and I work in my private practice. I deal with a range of different symptoms, but I'll tell you why PCOS became one of the specializations that I decided to pursue. And that is because over 20 years ago, I myself was diagnosed with the condition. And when I first heard of it, I did not know what it was. There was no information given to me. I was simply told to cut carbs and I was told to give up all chicken because chicken had hormones. This led to many, many years of going from specialist to specialist. One would tell me I don't have it, one would say I have it. I only got answers when I was in my 30s. So 10 years was wasted when I could have really learned the information. So in my journey of becoming a dietitian is when I started to learn how nutrition can influence long-term outcomes and complications. And then when I worked into the hospital, I noticed how many women were coming in also diagnosed with PCOS. Are we going to answer things in the chat or are we going to leave it for after? Because I'm seeing some questions
For
popping up.
after.
Okay, no problem, right? So yes, my pursuit of PCOS knowledge was somewhat, I was interested for myself, but also too, I noticed a gap. There was nobody talking about how do we integrate Caribbean food? How do we navigate our specific challenges in terms of our social gathering, our cultural events? And that is when I said, okay, more emphasis needs to be made. So we're going to do a little overview on what PCOS is, because if we don't do that, it would not be complete. So when we say PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome, people often think it's a gynecological issue because you will often get your diagnosis from a gynecologist. Most people get a diagnosis when they realize they're not seeing their period, or their period is excessively long, or they may be getting lots of other symptoms. Now, PCOS is an endocrine disorder, meaning it affects all aspects of the body, which is why there is no one protocol I can give to a single person. It must always be tailored to you. So when it is that we are looking at PCOS, people often say that it affects women of reproductive age. But I want to be clear, it is going to be something that is with you your whole lifespan. You don't go into menopause and say to yourself, I'm done with this PCOS thing. It's always there because it is like a hormonal disorder. So it will be a matter of managing. So in order to be diagnosed, one has to fit something called the Rotterdam criteria, and that means 2 out of 3 symptoms must be present. So it is either, for instance, we have irregular periods, or we have, for instance, signs of high androgens or excessive male hormone levels, such as we're getting the hirsutism, the irregular facial hair, or for instance, we're having acne that's persisting way past our puberty, or for instance, we have, let's say we have high levels of what we call your ovarian reserve. So there are multiple different aspects, and it's possible that you're diagnosed now, and within, let's say, a year or 2 years of making lifestyle changes, everything improves. So you won't fit the criteria exact then, but it doesn't mean it's gone away. You just have it kind of in remission. All right. Now, another very important factor of PCOS is what tends to be present a lot is insulin resistance. Now, most people with PCOS will have weight challenges. There are a very small percentage who do not experience that. And we refer to them as lean PCOS. It's not a technical term, but we're using it for this example. So they may not really be affected by those weight fluctuations, but it doesn't mean that they don't have insulin resistance. They often still face those elevated high androgens, just like persons who are affected by their weight. So therefore, everybody who has PCOS, whether it is weight affected or not, is at risk for metabolic disorders. All right, so let's look at the prevalence in our region and what is the challenges, because we are trying to understand how this is impacting us here as Caribbean women and why it is that we have barriers not only to diagnose, but to treat. So according to the latest regional study, and this study was not peer-reviewed, so we cannot quote it, let's say, as international data, but it was a study called the PCOS 360 study, and it determined that 1 in 4 Caribbean women are affected by PCOS, which is highlighting the prevalence within the population. So based on this study, and remember, this would only be reflective of the sample size, it was 24.4%. And I've had lots of doctors that I work with, they would challenge the amount of diagnosis of PCOS just because they find too many are being diagnosed. But I did look up the last study that was done internationally, and it was published by Lin et al. In 2025. And it said worldwide there's a substantial escalation in the global burden of PCOS over the past 32 years. Of course, as with everything, that international study left the Caribbean out completely. They have the world map, they have the major big countries and big continents highlighted. We were completely left out. So I'm not sure if they want to classify us in South America or if we were classified at all. But there is incidence that something has happened over the last 30 years that is causing the increase in not just the diagnosis, but the prevalence. There's also limited awareness. I would say there's only recently in the last 5 to 10 years more emphasis on what PCOS is. Before that, people didn't know. So there was often underdiagnosis and women did not get timely treatment. I've had clients who are now 60 years old, 70 years old, who are type 2 diabetics and will tell me that when they were in their youth, they were diagnosed with PCOS. They didn't do anything about it simply because they were not told they could do anything about it. And looking back now, they wish they had prevented the progression now to diabetes. So the health access challenges. Now, sometimes this challenge is due to economic situations. Everything in life costs money, and of course, seeing practitioners costs money as well. And if you have access to public health care, which is great, especially if it's free, they're often very lengthy waiting times. So that, along with your other responsibilities as a woman, whether you are a mother, you're a wife, you're a worker, whatever it is you're doing, often, we as women tend to put ourselves kind of last. So trying to seek that healthcare access can often come sometimes a little too late, even though I would say it's never too late to take charge of your health. All right, so let's look at some of the health risks associated with unchecked PCOS. And I don't share this to, what should I say, to scare anybody. I share this to kind of reiterate the seriousness of doing something about the condition when you have it. So just like we said, type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes is often what we call like the lifestyle kind of diabetes. And this is because we just said at the beginning that PCOS comes with a risk of insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is often your body's first warning sign something is off with your blood sugar control. Some people will get some symptoms. So for instance, we might get the telltale darkness around the neck or under the arms, which we call acanthosis nigricans. Or we might get the appearance of skin tags. Or we might find no matter how healthy or balanced I'm eating, I keep gaining weight or I'm not losing any weight. And there are a multitude of different symptoms such as excessive cravings, feeling constantly tired, hair loss, etc. So oftentimes I tell people you need to test. Just testing your HbA1c, which is the standard blood sugar test that tells us how 3 months of blood sugar control went, that won't tell us anything is wrong until it's too late. So once a doctor will see 5.7 or less, they'll say you're good, but you need some more investigating. We would need to see further blood tests such as your fasting blood sugar and your fasting insulin, because it's not always just prevalent just like that. And as I said, not everybody is going to get signs and symptoms. You also have the fatty liver disease. So this is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and it is a potential consequence of untreated PCOS because of metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is often a combination of your blood sugar out of control, your cholesterol high, we have excessive weight around the core, and we are not physically active. And non-alcoholic fatty liver disease often happens when your body is running out of places to store body fat. And this happens irrespective of a person's body weight. I will have clients come in who are not very much overweight, yet they have fatty liver. And then there are others who have excessive weight on their frame, but their liver is nice and clear. So when it comes to this fatty liver disease, it's 100% reversible once we find it early. And it is reversible by losing 5 to 10% of your body weight gradually. When it comes to this, crash dieting is actually going to make it worse. Now, why it's important to reverse it is your liver is almost like a big filter in your body. So if it is accumulating too much fat, that filtering process is hampered. And now we have the risk of hypercholesterolemia or too high cholesterol levels. So it's why I often tell women with PCOS, you see that keto diet and that carnivore diet that's trending right now, that is not for you. You already have an increased risk of high triglycerides and high LDL or bad cholesterol. So we're not trying to poke the bear basically. Now, when it is you have PCOS, keeping your cholesterol in check is important. And you also have to bear in mind your particular genetics. Does your family have a history of high cholesterol? Do they have a history of cardiovascular disease? Then monitoring how much fat you are eating and how much fiber you're eating becomes important to protect your heart. Also bear in mind that things like to come in twos and threes. So one doesn't just get diabetes, they get high cholesterol, and they tend to get blood pressure. It comes as a trio, which we then refer to as NCDs or non-communicable diseases. Right? Now we have the cardiovascular disease risk. So we just talked about the high cholesterol levels, but cardiovascular disease is another issue. Now, why I mentioned that PCOS doesn't magically go away in menopause is that when we go into menopause as women, our estrogen plummets. Before we go into menopause, our heart disease risk is lower than a man because the estrogen is protective to the heart. So when it plummets, our risk now rises. So imagine our risk rises. I mean, we're not taking care of ourselves. We were not exercising. We were not managing our cholesterol. We had insulin resistance. We were not doing health checks. It becomes almost like the perfect storm. And then, of course, your weight gain and metabolic complications, which is kind of like a double-edged sword because having PCOS in itself often means lots of people are fighting with their weight. But the issue with weight gain, especially with weight gain around the core, is it's increasing your risk of metabolic syndrome. And the more weight we often gain is the worse insulin resistance will be. It's the worsen of things like inflammation, for instance. So trying to manage your weight is important. It's not about trying to be as skinny as you possibly can. What I would tell people is really try to invest in an advanced scale. A normal scale, which just tells you your base weight day for day, is not going to tell you much. Sometimes people's weight is higher above their BMI, and BMI is highly flawed, by the way, because they carry lots of muscle. And high muscle mass is actually one of the superpowers of PCOS. Because of that increased testosterone or androgen, they tend to carry more muscle. So more muscle means that their weight is not just comprised of mostly fat. And that's why I'm saying if you have an advanced scale, you know how much body fat you're accumulating, where it is, what's your muscle mass, and it just gives you more information about your body composition. But of course, when it comes to the weight gain and the metabolic complications, we must make dietary modifications, which we'll discuss in a little while, and we must do the exercise. So let's look at the lifestyle challenges for Caribbean women. So the first and major challenge, I think, for all of us will be the diet and the portion size. I like to argue that Caribbean food is one of the best tasting foods ever. It is flavorful, it is rich, but we love our starch. And I don't think that is specific to only one island. We are all like this. And if it is that you look at our plate, what we tend to bulk on will be the carbohydrates. They may be healthy carbohydrates like green fig or plantain or potato or whatever it is, but there tends to be a lot of it. And our version of a balanced meal are often heavy meals. Think of when you've eaten a good Caribbean meal, that itis feeling you're feeling after. I mean, it may feel nice and you're full, but that is also a sign that the blood sugar is kind of out of control. So that will take, I would say, kind of rewiring of how it is we plate our food. And then, of course, the portion control. The next challenge is that we're just not physically active the way we used to be. Even people who exercise now, whether they go to the gym or they do a workout is just 1 hour of your day. If the rest of the time you are sitting, you're not really helping yourself to clear your cholesterol, manage your insulin resistance, or manage your weight. And I don't believe that all of your exercise should be done in like a structured form. We don't have time to be at the gym excessive hours. Build physical activity into your day. Whether it is you are parking your car a little further away to walk to wherever you're going, we're taking the stairs instead of the elevator. We on a weekend are going and walking our parks, savannas, or let's say we're going on a hike with friends. We're just trying to build in that step count. So use your phone, let it tell you what is your current step count. Let's say your step count right now is only 3,000 steps. That's a challenge to yourself to decide, how do I increase this by 1,000 steps every 2 to 3 weeks? It's not adding in any extra effort per se because you're building it into your everyday life. The next one is inflammation and gut health. So inflammation is one of the trending keywords right now, but it is valid because we have learned that the higher the levels of inflammation are, not just in your body, but in your gut, is the worsening of your insulin resistance. And where do we get higher levels of inflammation? Well, it's going to come from high consumption of sugars and fried foods. Now, when I say sugar foods, I don't only mean sweets. We use the term to mean refined carbohydrates. So whether we're talking here about white bread, or we're talking about white rice, corn flakes, or fried foods like fried bake or float, whatever we want to say, these items tend to be devoid of fiber. So all the good stuff that the flour or the item would have originally had in it was totally stripped. So when it is that we are eating these fast digesting carbohydrates that don't have a lot of fiber, your gut is not getting the nourishment it needs. Our gut tends to kind of ferment the fiber to make energy, what we call short chain fatty acids. And of course, the fried foods, the issue with it is they tend to be inflammatory because most times they use poor quality oil. It is not like we're going to fry food in, let's say, for instance, avocado oil, which has a higher price point. So we have to always consider the cultural significance of food. So when we're gathering around food. And it is central to every single cultural celebration. It's how we bond. So that's why I put the example of that plate. Look at the challenge there with portion size. There are multiple starches on that plate. We have rice with peas, we have a piece of fried breadfruit, we have plantain. So all of those items would be considered healthy in isolation, but together, that is a very rich, starchy meal. Now, I do agree that the portion of the vegetable is decent. We have some coleslaw that's not too creamy, but the portion of protein is very small. So as Caribbean people, we are taught to fill up on the starches, and we often leave the meat for last because that's the more expensive thing. That's a special thing. And eating as well in that terms of that pattern is also what's impacting our long-term health outcomes, because science has said now it is better to eat the fiber, the protein, and the starch last. So I tell people, eat kind of realistic. How many of us are just going to eat that dry salad alone, the meat alone, and then the starches? Try to have a bite of each so it's mixing. So that will help you naturally with portion control. Because if it is that we are eating the veggies and the protein with, I would say, predominance, by the time we reach the starches, we just simply can't eat all of it. So it's not like you're sitting down there saying, I cannot have it. Your stomach just cannot eat the quantity anymore. And it would also be important to get people involved in your journey. You know, oftentimes when we are trying to make health changes, you might get resistance, whether it's from friends or family. You need to educate people to let them know why you are doing something. Sometimes it is not about telling people, you know, I'm trying to watch my weight, I'm trying to lose my weight. It's about I'm trying to be healthy. You know, I'm trying to prevent long-term outcomes. I am trying to break the chain of genetics here. Something like that to let them know I'm still enjoying the food that you have at the social gathering, but it's not like I need to eat everything that you have made. Choose your favorites and leave the excess there. And this comes down to mindful eating. So it is something we like to say a lot as dietitians, and oftentimes people may roll their eyes and say, you know, what does this mean? Basically, we're trying to say that nothing is off limits. From the time you think something is off limits, you're going to feel shame and guilt when you eat it. And that is why we say really try to tune into your hunger cues. It is why I dissuade women in particular from things like intermittent fasting, because you're not allowing your body to tell you when you're hungry and you're limiting yourself to this small eating window. And that's just not how energy regulation works. So it comes down to being aware of your portion sizes. So like in my practice, for instance, I will teach clients what is the macro and calorie distribution of what's the plate on the left. And they're going to decide for me how we redistribute this. So how I would redistribute that is I would say the first thing you're going to decide on for me is the protein. And the protein needs to be X amount of grams. Of course, this is specific to the client. Then we decide on the vegetables, and then you're going to choose for me the best carbohydrate. So given the options we have there, it's between the rice and peas and the provision, right? I wouldn't really say that the piece of breadfruit is a game deal, or why should I say a deal breaker, but it is deep fried. So in the grand scheme of things, it will kind of add to that information kind of vibe. So these are the practical tips for Caribbean women. The first thing is you must get the hang of balanced plates. So again, we're looking at the picture there, the green fig with the saltfish. That's a typical Caribbean plate. But again, too much starch. That's not a balanced plate, because while it will have good carbohydrate, it does not have enough vegetables in terms of fiber, and definitely does not have enough protein. So what we are really feeling full on again is the excess starch. I want you guys to picture your plate having a line down the center. This line down the center splits it in half, and you're not going to put half of your plate as starches as we normally do. Half of the plate must be vegetables. Whether the vegetables are cooked vegetables or they are salad, all we care about is that you have the volume there of fiber. The next half of the plate we are going to cut into two half quadrants or quarters. Quarter of your plate is always going to be protein, whether the protein is animal protein such as chicken, fish, or it's tofu, or whichever kind of plant-based protein you're choosing. And the last quadrant is where we put our carbs. So it is going to take a little bit of adjustment to reframe the plate. The next step is protein is your anchor. So you're always going to start meal planning or thinking about what you're eating as what is the protein. So if you're meal planning home for your family, you're going to think, okay, today I'm going to make some baked chicken, then I'm going to do lentils, I'm going to do some Spanish rice, I'm going to do veg, or whatever your protein is. If you're a vegetarian and your protein is just peas, peas actually does not give us enough protein per meal. So we might need to add some tofu, or we might need to add some plant-based protein alternatives to that. The next thing is focus on increasing the fiber. Fiber is important not just for cholesterol and for weight management, but also because we're not really talking about it here in this presentation, but fibroids is an issue too. And one of the ways that we control the growth of fibroids is by increasing your fiber, so you detox excess hormones in your stool. As women, we are to aim for 25 grams of fiber for the day. So when it is that someone decides they are not eating any carbs at all, and they decide that, carbohydrates are the worst thing out, they're kind of doing themselves a disservice. It is never about not eating the carbs. It is about eating the right types and the right quantity. Go for routine health screening. And I would say for women with PCOS, the most important health screening is going to be your blood sugar testing and your lipid profile. There are a multitude of others that we can do. We can test for inflammation. We can do your CBC, which is your complete blood count, see if you have anemia. There are many different factors. But basically, those two, the blood control, the blood sugar control, and the cholesterol, lets us know about those long-term complications. The next one is going to be to advocate with healthcare providers. You really have to find providers that you can speak to. And I mean, even when I am working with people, if I realize that I am going to see a doctor about my PCOS, they're not letting me talk, they're not letting me share my experience, they're not offering me practical tips, go elsewhere. You can also decide to print and walk with your articles, justifying your point. So like for instance, when it is that I was diagnosed and they said the only alternative was metformin, not like I have anything against metformin, it has its role. I had to show them the research that I can use inositol, maybe I can use berberine. And that is how you start to share the knowledge. Because remember, as a health practitioner, they're dealing with multitudes of different cases. And then finally, incorporate daily movement. So the challenges in PCOS management of Caribbean women now. So our current challenge, we don't have region-specific dietary guidance. And research tailored to the needs of Caribbean women with PCOS is still in progress. I know up to 2023, at least UE here in Trinidad, they were trying to do the data. The issue was women did not want to participate. And they had even asked if it is that, clients coming to personal dietitians would be willing to participate in the study. And by and large, no. Lots of women who have PCOS want to stay confidential with their data. They don't want to share. So that in itself has kind of restricted how much knowledge we could get on the prevalence, basically, and the awareness. And plus, when you look at the data, just as I said before, you're never going to see a book that is saying the benefit of pumpkin for PCOS or how plantain can work. You're going to see asparagus, right? You're going to see broccoli. And depending on which region you live in the Caribbean, these things could be totally out of your grasp or totally out of your budget. The next challenge there is cultural tailoring. It's very hard to find meal plans that are tailored to where you live, and especially depending on your island. Every single island in the Caribbean is going to have their specific dishes that they're known for. And how is it that you can tell someone who has PCOS, you can never eat this dish ever again? So it comes down to really knowing how to teach someone to tweak what they're currently eating. So I'm not familiar with every single dish from every single island. So I will speak about the one I am from. Let us say, for instance, that we are talking about a client who wants to, let's say, have curry, for instance. You can make curry more nutritionally balanced. So we could always add peas. And let's say we're making dal. We can blend pumpkin into the dal. It is adding some extra fiber. We can swap the regular white rice for, let's say, brown rice if needed to increase the fiber further. We can add more veggies on the side, such as bhaji. And of course, we could do our standard curry chicken or curry fish. And this can be done for every single cuisine. Let's say it is that I had a client in the Caribbean who decided their favorite food was sushi, even that which is high carb and tends to be lower protein. Amendments can be made. So this really comes down to more or less either you pairing up with a nutrition professional like myself who has the knowledge to tweak the meals, or experimenting in your kitchen for yourself and deciding how can I make my traditional meals a little bit healthier in terms of blood sugar balance, maybe information to make it work for me. And then we have social norms. So our cultural eating practices complicate portion control. And what do I mean by this? Anybody has ever gone to a gathering and people are pushing food on you? They're doing it nicely, but people want you to eat. And that's just how Caribbean people are. We show love with food, especially if we've made something, we want people to taste everything. We want to see the plate nice and big. And now that complicates people when they are trying to make changes with their nutrition. Because one, you feel bad when you say no. Two, they make you feel bad sometimes. And then we have the awareness gap. So this comes down to the fact that we have delayed diagnosis, and then oftentimes people don't know what PCOS is. So this complicates the management even further. And the awareness gap exists a lot. I wouldn't say with the current generation who are up to 40 years old now. The awareness gap is going to be with the older generation. So imagine going to a family event, you're navigating all of this food and you have to tell your auntie, your uncle, you know, I can't eat all of this right now, but maybe I need to take some home because I have PCOS. That opens up a whole conversation of, well, how you get that? You can't get that from my side of the family, right? Not knowing that part of PCOS is genetic. We're just not sure of the origin 100% yet because more research needs to be done. So remember that culturally relevant guidance is key to managing PCOS because just following what they will have, just international guidelines often don't work. So effective management has to look at our culturally tailored approaches, our food, our lifestyle, for instance. It has to look at the regular physical activity, and it has to raise awareness, more importantly, and proactive health behaviors. I often find things are very much, we are motivated by when the health outcome is already bad. At least I see that. When people already have high cholesterol or they have their blood sugar is out of control, now they're ready to take action. But what about taking action before that even comes into play? And again, it comes down to reframing the plate. So the plate we have there, you would see that the carbohydrate amount is reduced and the vegetable is increased. And the vegetable does not have to be carrots. I just use that as a standard image. It can be whatever vegetable we want of choice. And I also think we need to have lots more engaging discussions. So kind of like what we're doing here right now, all of us women together listening, going to talk and have discussion after, because sharing insights about our particular lived-in experience with PCOS is important, especially how it's affected in our region. And the topics may include what is affecting you personally. Are you affected by hirsutism? Do you find you have insomnia? Do you have an infertility issue? Also, how does your culture affect your diet? How does it affect your lifestyle, for instance? And what strategies have you found to manage it? Because oftentimes those kind of forums are where women are able to bounce ideas and thoughts off of each other and help each other outside of like a doctor's office. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. So I leave it open now to your Q&A.
Thank you so much, Tessa. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're
That was
welcome.
so good. So I hand over now to Kimet, who will be guiding us through the Q&A section.
Sure.
Hi, good night, everyone, and thanks again to you, Tessa, for that insightful presentation. I particularly like the fact that you mentioned reframing your plates because that part is so important, right? Especially as we try to navigate this whole thing that is PCOS, this whole whirlwind that's PCOS. So I don't see any questions in the chat here on Zoom. And I don't see any on the Facebook either, but I do have three questions just to kind of get things going a bit,
Sure.
and then maybe as persons come, we can have them ask questions. So my first one, and this is something that I'm asking because, I like sweets, but I trying to substitute, So my first question is, what role do like local fruits, like mangoes, bananas, pepper, what do those play in a PCOS friendly diet, especially considering their natural sugar content?
Right, so great question. So all nutrition would have said that all of those higher sugar fruits, such as the ones you mentioned, were no-nos. New
Mm-hmm.
nutrition doesn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they have a higher glycemic index, meaning they're going to raise your blood sugar more. But what's important is what you eat fruit with. So we wouldn't really advise for you to sit down and eat a mango just by itself. We would want to have the mango eaten with, let's say, some yogurt. Now, if it is that you cannot handle dairy, we would choose something else. And the reason for that is a balanced meal always contains protein as the anchor. And if it is that we've eaten enough protein, the only other anchor could be fat. So let's use the example of like an apple. An apple would be like with peanut butter. If we are having a banana, we could blend the banana in, let's say, a protein-based shake. So they are 100% allowed, but it comes down to what we are eating them with and the portion. Because I don't know about you all, but when it comes to mango, it is very hard just to eat one.
Right? Exactly. And I've had to try in some instances to like eat it in portions, just to, yeah. So you cut one slice and then you cut another slice, you cut another slice. But I really like this perspective in terms of like mixing it with something else, pairing
That's
it with
right.
something else. I see it a lot on TikTok. So persons have been, blending, mixing things. So that's something that's worth a try for us. Thanks for that.
No problem.
So my next question is, you mentioned like a few things, Burberry and a few other things, right? Sorry, let me ask it this way. Are there specific Caribbean like herbs or teas or like spices that you would recommend that persons could use with their PCOS management?
Definitely things like ginger and turmeric. The ginger and turmeric are considered anti-inflammatory, and they are things that we would add into our cooking anyway. And things like onion and garlic, which we will just consider as seasonings, they are what we call prebiotics. So they actually kind of give your gut the healthy food they need to keep the probiotics alive. Now, there are lots more in question right now, such as moringa, etc. Honestly, I can't really discuss that because more research needs to be done. Going into the category of like herbs and stuff is not really the realm of a dietitian unless it has gone through, I would say, rigid testing. The way berberine has gone through rigid testing. Now, why I would have mentioned that is that has started to be used, but oftentimes people are now just picking up a bottle of berberine and taking it on their own, not realizing that that can affect your liver enzymes. And if you are on berberine, you need to go and do those blood tests to make sure all is well.
So it would be okay to use it, but just we have to do our research and we have to ensure that
That's right.
taking it appropriately, right? Consuming these appropriately. Okay, thanks for that tip. And my third question is, how can women with PCOS grocery shop smartly in the Caribbean? Are there like some must-haves that we should have in our basket? Like when we go shopping, what are some things that you would suggest that we definitely need to have or should have in our basket?
So before you go to the grocery, couple of tips. Eat first, because if you go to the grocery and you're hungry, you're going to pick up nonsense, right? The second thing is go with a list. And you're going with that list because you sat down in your kitchen and you decided, what am I going to cook this week? I generally recommend women with PCOS to meal prep. And I'm telling you to meal prep, not just so that your grocery bill is controlled, but because of the concept of resistant starch. When we cook starchy foods like plantain, rice, whatever, we let it cool down and reheat it, you have created this resistant starch, and that just means it doesn't affect your blood sugar as much. So stand up in your kitchen and decide what is your menu for the week. And
Okay.
based on that menu, you then go in your pantry or your fridge and you decide, what do I have already? Because you always want to use what you have. And then what do I need to buy?
Okay.
Your cart should have mostly what we call the outskirts of the grocery store. So your fresh fruits and veggies. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it depends if it is that you get veggies and fruits at a great cost because it's in season, like when mango is in season here. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
don't buy the mango, get it from somebody, but I would take it and I would cut it up, cube it, and freeze it. So that is
Okay.
allowing me to use that fruit that may be out of season for a
All
longer period
right.
of time, right? Same thing with
Mm-hmm.
veggies. I would buy them in bulk and I would wash them and freeze them. For instance, spinach or callaloo bush, because it mean it going in a callaloo anyways. And I would also tell people as well, if it is that whatever grocery store or market you frequent has an active social media page where they're
Uh-huh.
letting you know what is the current price point of items or when they have current sales, that is when you want to stock up on those specific things.
Okay. Thank you so much for that insight. Thank you.
No
Thank
problem.
you. I see a question here. Anisha says, "Hello, I'm half Trini and half Vincy." Shout out to you, Anisha. Across after crossing 31 years old, my efforts in the kitchen and moving my body no longer have any effect with managing my PCOS systems and weight. It just stopped budging, but I had a pretty good handle on it for a few years. Does it just get harder as we age, even before the menopausal stage?
I think it gets harder for women as we get older to lose weight no matter what. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, PCOS makes it a little bit more difficult, but sometimes it comes down to finding your root cause. Is it that we have an insulin resistance factor going on here? Do we have high inflammation? And you will know because oftentimes your inflammation is high, you're constantly on edge, you're not sleeping well, or you find you have high levels of anxiety, lots of headaches. Do we find we are constantly bloated? We have constant gut issues such as acid reflux. So there are multiple different factors when it comes to PCOS. The weight is just one part of it. But if you're really trying everything you can to lose weight and it's not happening, there's always a reason why. Though I will say, even for myself, the strategies that I would have done in my 20s are not going to work now that I've hit my 40s. So it does come with a change of how we do things. And well,
Mm-hmm.
menopause is going to bring its own challenges as well when the hormone levels plummet.
That's true. That's true. Thank you for that. We don't have any other questions here in the Zoom or on Facebook, but is there anyone who is joining us who has a question and would like to raise their hand? Well, I see one now, Odelia.
Hi. Um, I'm not sure yet if it's a question or a comment, but the question that Anisha, I think her name is, just asked, sort of building on that question. As somebody who went into surgically induced menopause in her 30s, um, after needing a hysterectomy for adenomyosis,
Mm-hmm.
I have PCOS and endo.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, not it's so important that what you're saying about educating yourself and being able to advocate for yourself. Because even as somebody who was an advocate for these conditions already, it never crossed my mind that with the hysterectomy, I still have PCOS.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many women who don't realize that. You think that, okay, the ovaries are gone. Yay, I'm free. But
Mm-hmm.
no, it actually just got worse because now you have PCOS and whatever other condition you have, and you're in menopause.
Yeah.
So the things that helped me before, because I eat fairly well, lots of vegetables, making sure I have my fiber and all of that. and movement. I was doing everything right. And then from the time I went into menopause, I'm still trying to get my footing on what works now.
Mm-hmm.
Because and I just feel so out of whack.
Mm-hmm.
So as somebody who's now in their 40s, in menopause, with PCOS and endo, trying to manage all of this, just you trying to do everything, um, and it's like sometimes you want to give up because like what more do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Like what else do I cut? Because your body still needs a little bit of carbs.
Yeah.
You still need to you're trying to do everything right and it just seems like it's just not working. And so it can be frustrating and overwhelming at times when you
I
really think about it and you're like, Lord, what's
yeah.
more?
I definitely understand it. And I would say at least a few times for the month in my office, women that are going through perimenopause or menopause sit down and cry.
Yeah,
Because I always tell them, my office is a safe space. Tell me what's on your mind. Release it here. If you don't release it, you're still holding on to that energy. And you're talking to a woman too. So I
yeah.
understand that we have lived in experience. And I mean, it's hard going through all this life change. Imagine we all our years since we're 13 or however old we having our period, then all of a sudden it stops and all these hormones go out of whack and all of this set of bacchanal, right? And
Mhm.
on top of it, yes, okay, we know we have PCOS, we have endo, for instance, we need to manage weight, but now that becomes challenging in its own, right? And you're like doing everything right. I have clients, sometimes they barely eat, they're exercising like crazy, they can't lose a pound. So, yes, sometimes you feel to give up, but then sometimes I reframe it and tell them it is not just about your weight. This is about protecting your heart. The exercise is about feeling good. It's probably helping to counteract the insomnia that menopause is kind of causing to happen because you're feeling tired. The fruits and vegetables is giving you antioxidants to kind of reduce your cancer risk. And depending on their mood that day, they might say, "Gosh, Tessa, why you saying it like that?" But it's because when you are frustrated about your weight not moving, I need to find something else for you to hold on to give you motivation. And oftentimes, too, the scale is not going to say what you want it to say all the time. I don't know about you, but I could step on it tomorrow, it up 1 pound, next day down, then it up 3 pounds. It just will fluctuate depending on how much sodium you eat, how much starchy foods you eat at that point in time, even if the portion was controlled, your hormonal fluctuations. So, what I would tell people is a better reflection of your efforts will be how your clothes fit, and more importantly, how you feel. Not everything is about how we looking. How you feeling is the most important thing.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And thanks also, Adelia, for sharing. We have a question here. Someone says, "Good evening, Tessa. Can you advise for a rice lover? What would you recommend?"
It depends on what we cook it. So, for instance, if we're using parboiled rice, parboiled meaning partly boiled, I would say we use that for any rice dish where vegetables are incorporated, such as here we would have bhaji rice, we might have Spanish rice, we might have okra rice. You can use the parboiled there because we are already adding fiber with vegetables. But let's say we're eating rice alone, that is when I would tell you incorporate brown rice. And it could be locally made brown rice, it could be red rice, it could be brown basmati rice, but try to limit the consumption of the higher glycemic index rice, which will be white basmati rice and white jasmine rice. It doesn't mean that we cannot eat it, but you need to watch not just how much of it you eat, but the order. So you're never going to start eating the starchy rice first. Just as I said in the presentation, you're going to start eating some of the protein and some of the vegetable and alternate it with some of the portion of the rice. And when you're making rice, I know TikTok is saying now cook your rice and freeze it. Freezing it is not necessary unless you are storing it for a later date. But cook your rice, cool it down for a few hours, and reheat it later to form resistant starch. This helps your rice not affect your blood sugar as much.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Do you have any other
Hi,
questions?
good night. Well,
Good
I
night.
joined late, so I missed out a lot on the what was said, right?
Mhm.
So I have PCOS, I have ME. I've exercised, eat healthy, exercise, eat healthy. Weight is still there. Painful periods. If I like go outside and I just walk from right here to across the road, my private area just starts to sweat like that, just sweat uncontrollably, just like that. So it's like I can't even do much walking outside when I'm at work, have to be like inside all the time because of that. What can I use like something to like help control the sweating in that area?
I'm not familiar with the excess sweating as a consequence of PCOS, to be quite honest. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. I do know that there is a syndrome associated with the excessive sweating. The name of it is not
Hyperhidrosis.
coming. That's right, thank you. So the hyperhidrosis. I do know a couple of people who have had it in the past, and it just comes down to management. Um, Thankfully, you have not said that with the hyperhidrosis, you are getting any kind of symptoms of any kind of imbalance. Because generally with PCOS, what we see vaginally related is a lot more incidence of like bacterial infections, stuff like that. So if it is just we're getting excessive sweating, well, maybe it might mean that if we're exercising outdoors, we need to wear dark clothing that would kind of camouflage the sweating, or we need to have more moisture wicking underwear to help under, or maybe we just need to exercise in an AC environment, because I wouldn't want to tell you not to exercise at all. The exercise is extremely important, not just for weight management, but for your cholesterol, blood sugar control, and the like. And
Right.
because you had missed some of the presentation before, your weight may not be budging, but do you know your muscle mass? There is the potential that your muscle mass is pretty high. And I find that when it is people see the whole scale measurement and I explain to them, this is your body fat, this is your muscle mass, this is your water, they don't feel as bad about their weight, because we are often comparing our weight now, let's say we're in our 40s, to when we were in our 30s and our 20s, and your body constantly changes. And you want to be mindful of how that change is occurring. If that change is occurring that in your 40s, let's say your weight is 160 pounds, but 110 pounds is muscle, you're doing pretty good. You just have more of a muscular physique. And as I would have said earlier, PCOS has a couple superpowers. First superpower is you tend to have higher muscle mass. So actually maintaining that muscle, where other women would lose mad amounts of muscle when they reach menopause, tends not to be so much of a problem with PCOS. The next one is they tend to go into menopause later on. So going into full-blown menopause, unless it is we had to have it surgically done, is kind of a later point. So that leads us to the third superpower, depends on how you view it, is that if it is someone wants to decide later on in life to have children and they have not faced fertility issues, they still have the possibility longer.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, there's another question in the chat.
Someone says, how does PCOS affect fertility as you reach 40, especially for women without children?
So we have often found when women reach 40 and above, sometimes their fertility improves. We are not sure why, but it could be a consequence that they are less stressed, they find more balance in their life, or their hormones just suddenly start to regulate after a lifetime of it being all over the place. So, of course, it depends on your AMH or your anti-Müllerian hormone levels, and that is something your gynecologist can send you to test. And it basically says your egg reserve. So there's always the possibility once your egg reserve is high. I've had many women with PCOS, all of a sudden in their 40s, they start having children and they are all healthy. So I would say if you're interested at all in knowing that, book an appointment with your gynecologist, do a full hormone profile, as well as looking at your vitamin D status, because vitamin D is important for fertility. We live in the Caribbean, but not many of us are going out and sunning ourselves all day. And that will give you a better indication of where you stand right now.
Okay, thank you for that. And I hope that answers the individual questions. Tina, I think it is. Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions. I'm just gonna give persons another chance. Do we have any more questions? Tina Kaina says thank you.
No
Okay.
problem.
So since we don't have any other questions, I think we can wrap up here. We just want to say on behalf of the SPG Association of Endometriosis, Adenomyosis, and PCOS Inc., thank you so much to Mrs. Tessa Hampton for giving us this information and sharing with us her knowledge. We really appreciate you taking the time with us, especially as we observe PCOS Awareness Month. So thank you so much for that knowledge. Is there anything else anyone wants to share, ladies? Odelia, Liz, before we wrap up?
Thank you so much. It was super informative as always. We really appreciate you coming in and to share your knowledge with us.
Most welcome.
Yeah, it's just the same. Thank you so much as always. It's always a pleasure having you join us. I'm really hoping one day, we can win the lotto and have you actually come in person. But
I always like to hear your accent. I always like to hear your accent. It's nice to hear.
so until then, we thank the Lord for Zoom. And
Mhm.
always appreciate you've never turned us down. So thank you again. And so if you could just, as we close, leave your contact information if anybody wants to reach out to you to book a consultation or just, talk to you further. Maybe some people are a little shy and they want to do it privately. That's fine. But if you could just leave us with your contact information so that people can reach out to you as
Sure,
needed.
no problem. So I am on all social media platforms. You know my handle is trini.pcos.weightloss.rd, a long thing, but it had to be that. And my contact is 868-721-2726. And I work with clients all over the world once they're Caribbean based. Now, why I say that is I teach you about Caribbean food. Doesn't mean that I don't have awareness how to balance an American or Canadian plate. But I mean, I am trained in the Caribbean. So it's a Caribbean-based diet that I would discuss. And as I said, I work with clients in my Woodbrook office or virtual. So it is all up to you to reach out if it is you want further information or if you want to discuss. You could also send me a DM on Instagram, or I would say, for instance, WhatsApp. I don't too much check my TikTok DM, so try not to send it there.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Tessa, for facilitating this evening session. I wish everyone a wonderful evening. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Good
Good
night. Take care.
Bye.